Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll get started. I appreciate everyone coming tonight to learn a little bit about RTAP, the Residential Traffic Administration Program. Um, so what we're going to do tonight is here's a basic preview or an outline of some of the topics that we're going to cover tonight. I'm going to start with just kind of a basic 101 kind of a discussion and an overview of the program and generally what it entails. You could spend quite a bit of time talking about all the details, but so it'll be a little bit of a high level discussion, but give you guys an overview of the RTAP program to start. From there, we'll talk a little bit more about what you can expect should you decide to go through that process. Um, it's it's not all apparent, by reading for example, an overview, what some of the more challenging aspects might be and sort of the time and effort that it might take. So we'll talk about some about that. Um, some tips maybe about how to navigate the process, some areas that you might not expect to be difficult, or maybe some steps you might not even expect. So we'll just talk about how to get through the process and share some of our experiences with the process. Um, a lot of what I want to do tonight is make sure folks are aware of some of the resources that are available to you, both some of the county's resources, but also resources that Fairfax Families for Safe Streets has sort of compiled and put together. Tonight's presentation being one new addition to that. So we'll spend some time talking about those resources. And then at the end and throughout, I'd like, to hear what questions you have. Very interested in your feedback. We've certainly had some discussions with some Fairfax Families for Safe Streets members who have been through the process and they've shared their experiences. But I think the more feedback we get and more information we get about the process, the better we can tailor and improve and update our resource guide and the resources that we have available on our website. And frankly, in the long term, I think we're interested in advocating for some changes and improvements to the process. And so all of that feedback will be helpful in our efforts to do so. And then in terms of next steps, yeah, maybe just a little bit about what we Fairfax Families for Safe Streets might like to do next in terms of working with RTAP. So that's the basic overview. So we'll dive right in. Okay, so in terms of the RTAP 101, this is just right from the county's website. The RTAP program is, as stated, works with communities to decrease the impacts of traffic violence and enhance safety in area neighborhoods. And it does that through a limited framework that they're authorized to use through the Virginia Department of Transportation. So, VDOT owns and operates our roads. They have given FCDOT some authority to implement this RTAP program, but it's fairly strictly bound. And so there are limits to what the RTAP program can do. But these are some of the tools that the RTAP program can use to achieve those goals. So there's a traffic calming program, which I think is what most people think of when they think of RTAP. It's the most frequent and common part of the program that's utilized. Obviously, trying to get people to slow down on your neighborhood streets. But there's also 4 other programs. There's a cut-through mitigation program. If you happen to live on a street that gets a lot of high-speed or high-volume traffic during rush hours, there is a cut-through mitigation program that can prevent people from using that street during certain hours as a way of calming your neighborhood streets. And then there are also enhanced fine area zones speeding fine zones that you can implement in certain areas. There are watch for children signs, and there are through truck traffic restrictions, signage, and corresponding enforcement that you can implement. So tonight, I'm really going to focus primarily on the traffic calming um, tool or the traffic calming process, because again, that's what I think sort of by default most people can think about when they're talking about RTAP. But I did want to point out these first 2 programs, the traffic calming program, the cut through mitigation program, are the 2 programs that require basically a balloting process, a voting process. The community must vote in favor. And as a result of that, the process is quite different, many more steps, much more difficult to get through. And therefore, I think, people generally need more help with it. So that's one of the reasons we're going to focus on on the traffic calming process. The other programs are a little bit more straightforward. And if you allow me to switch to a different screen here, I'm going to show you a quick reference chart that the county provides. And I apologize if the font is a little small here. But essentially what this chart is showing you are these 5 different areas of the program: traffic calming on the left, cut-through mitigation in the second column, and then the other 3. And if you look closely in the procedures, you'll see that one of the steps here in the traffic calming program, again, is this community voting, and the same thing happens over here in the cut-through mitigation program. Whereas the other processes mostly involve you working with your supervisor's office and getting their support, and there's not a need to go back to your community for a vote. So I'm not going to go through this graphic in great detail, but you can see there are sort of some qualification rules. You can't use RTAP for any and every street in the county. You can't, so all these programs have boundaries about what types of streets they can be used on. The vehicle throughput, in the case of traffic calming, it's a combination of the posted speed limit, number of vehicles that use it per day, and then the result of the speed study, which we'll talk a little bit about. So there's some qualification rules, and then if you can move forward from there, there are sort of a series of steps which we'll spend more time talking about. So again, we're going to focus mostly on traffic calming. And within the traffic calming program, there are, again, a limited number of traffic calming devices that the county can choose from to implement the desired traffic calming on your street. And not to get too wonky in the transportation, terminology, but there are a set of what they call horizontal devices and vertical devices. Horizontal devices tend to sort of change the geometry of the road, or the maybe where the curbs are, by creating bulb outs or chicanes. Chokers are things that sort of narrow the width of the roadway, a crosswalk refuge, etc. And then there's these vertical devices, which everybody immediately thinks of speed bumps. Speed bumps are not listed here, right? So speed humps, speed tables, speed cushions are not the same thing as what people typically think of as a speed bump, which is the short, very sort of severe device that you might see in a grocery store parking lot, or something of that sort, that you really literally have to go, just a couple of miles an hour to get over. Speed humps, speed tables, speed cushions are different, and it's important to sort of understand the difference. And we could talk a little bit about that if folks have questions. I highlighted speed humps and speed tables because they are, in the end, from what we see in terms of approved and implemented traffic calming devices, people that successfully get through the RTAP program, these speed humps and speed tables are, in a vast majority of time, what is ultimately implemented. These others are an option, but they're much less frequently suggested by the county. And I can illustrate that to you guys quickly. I think the information is interesting to look at. So let me switch to my browser, and I'm going to show you this county mobility and transportation dashboard, which you may or may not have ever looked at, but this is linked from our RTAP resource guide, which you'll have access to here at the end of the presentation. And I'm going to draw your attention to this sort of tile in the middle on the bottom, which says cumulative count of traffic calming devices installed. You can see they're trending upwards a bit in the number that are installed. I'm going to drill in here and show you the data underlying this piece of the dashboard. It's going to take a second to load here. I think it's still, yeah, okay. So the little sort of pie chart, ring chart here is showing you a breakdown of all of these installed devices by type. And I'll mouse over this one type. So 67% of this total number of installed traffic devices were speed humps. Another 20% were speed tables. So you can see speed humps and speed tables are, again, you know, more than a vast majority of almost 90% of the devices that have been installed. And I think if you drill into the more recent years, I think the percentages are even a bit larger. So I'm not saying that that's the only thing that you might get through the program, but it's the most far and away the most common type of device that is installed. And if you're interested, this dashboard is interesting to look at. You can sort of pick a particular device, like a speed table, and the map will refresh and show you the locations where they're installed. You can drill in and get pretty close, and you can sort of see where one of these has been installed. Maybe you can find one that's near you, and you can sort of see what it looks like. But there's not too much more to this dashboard than just this. It just shows you all of the installed traffic calming devices, and you can filter by type, and in the top right, you can filter by year. So it may be of use for you just sort of to see what's been done and what's out there. Okay, I can see some folks are putting stuff in the chat. If there's questions, feel free to ask me because I'm sorry I can't see it while I'm presenting, or I can't figure out how to do it. Okay, so let's drill a little bit into the traffic calming process itself. That one graphic I showed you before showed some of the steps, but let's talk a little bit more about each of the steps for those who maybe aren't aware. At the beginning, there's an initiation step. You need to reach out and contact your district supervisor, who will help you with that initial part of the process, and they'll get it over to FCDOT. Importantly, there is this qualification step specific to traffic calming. Folks can speak up if I miss something, but I believe that these are the three requirements that you have to meet before the process would move forward. They do, a traffic count and a speed study. So first of all, it has to be on a 25 mile per hour signed road. You can't use RTAP for roads that have posted speed limits that are higher. And then they'll do a traffic count and they'll do a speed study. And so you have to be within this range of vehicles per day. And the speed study will then determine this sort of technical term that a lot of transportation folks use called the 80th percentile speed. And it can be confusing. It's not entirely intuitive. But essentially what it means is they'll take a distribution, they'll measure the speed of every vehicle for a period of time. And what they're trying to determine is at what speed are 85% of all drivers driving at or below. And so in order to qualify for the program, the 85th percentile speed has to be more than 10 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. So basically it has to be over 35 miles per hour. So if 85% of drivers are driving at 34 miles per hour or lower, you're not going to qualify for the program. If they're driving at 85% of the drivers are driving at 39 miles per hour, then you would qualify for the program. There's nothing in this that looks at the top 15%, right? So if your speed study comes back and the 85th percentile speed is 34 miles an hour, but you've got 5 people every day that are going 100 miles an hour down your road, that doesn't matter. It's the 85th percentile speed. That's the threshold for the speed study. If you meet the qualification steps, then your process can move forward. It does not mean that you will have traffic calming devices installed on your roadway. It just means you're allowed to continue the process. Okay. Next, the county would come back with a conceptual traffic calming plan, basically sort of drawings showing what they feel the appropriate mitigation devices are, and their placement, and you can work with them to make some adjustments, but essentially they're going to provide to you a plan. And then it's going to be your job to see if you can convince your community that that's going to work. The first step, which I don't think is always clear in reading some of the materials, is that you have to get sign off by all of the directly affected property owners. So in a hypothetical case where they're going to put a speed table in the roadway, and that's immediately adjacent to three property owners, before you can move forward to, the rest of the steps, you need to get those three property owners to say, I'm okay with this. And that, of course, requires some legwork and some determination and some education and some convincing.
And
Um,
Chris,
yeah,
I,
Jamie, go ahead.
I just want to point out that that includes if the property owner lives somewhere else. Like they could live in North Carolina and not have set foot in Fairfax County for 25 years, and you still need them to sign off on it.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. Okay, and then I mean, I'm skipping a lot, right? These things don't happen in days. This is these are weeks, months, but the next part of the next major step in the process is that you would have uh, organize a community meeting. The county and your supervisor will help a little bit with logistics, I think, in terms of the location and scheduling, but you're going to have to advertise, you're going to have to prepare the materials for the meeting, you're going to have to get people there. The county will present a little bit on the plan, a little bit on the speed study, but really it's going to be up to you to determine what you want that meeting to look like and what materials you want to present that meeting. This is going to be at some point where you're well along in the process of trying to convince your community that this is a good thing. But you will need to have this community meeting when you're ready for it. And we could talk more about what the community meeting might look like. And we've got some people here who've online who've been through it and probably could share some more details. But I'm going to move on to the vote. So ultimately, this is all going to come down to a balloting process. And I think the important part to understand here and the most difficult hurdle probably in all of this is that the voting requirements are incredibly strict or stringent. The bar is incredibly high. It's probably not like any other kind of voting you've been a part of. But basically more than 50% of the residences or businesses in the ballot area, and we can come back to this, but essentially the county will determine based on the plan all of the properties that they feel are impacted by this plan. So they'll cast kind of a wide net. They could be hundreds and hundreds of residences depending upon your plan. But you need to get more than 50% of all of those properties to vote in favor of this traffic calming plan. And a missing or absent vote is a no vote. So I had someone who emailed me recently saying, we just went through our ballot process. We had 85% of ballots returned in favor, but we only had about 55% of people return their ballots. I might have gotten those numbers wrong, but if you do the math, that comes out to a little bit less than 50%. Again, if I remember the numbers right. But so you can see that it's incredibly difficult to get to that level because you have to get a vote from every property. And again, no votes, I'm sorry, missing votes or absent votes count as no votes. They'll also throw out ballots that are filled out incorrectly. So this is the most difficult part of the process, and I think one that I think it's fair to say we have a lot of, we have issues with. So I think I actually put in here, oh no, I didn't. I thought maybe it's later. I thought I put in here some little examples of votes that would fail and votes that would succeed. But hopefully the math makes sense. It's not like the voting for your president. It's not like voting for your state senator. It's not like voting for your supervisor. Um, you know, turnout matters, right? And everybody who doesn't turn out is a vote against. And then lastly, if you are successful, there are more steps required by the Board of Supervisors and VDOT and FC so at that point, I guess you've made it through the most difficult part. But again, there's lots of nuances and lots of more details in these steps that we can circle back to. But that's kind of the high level overview of what the process looks like. Okay. So what you might expect, and these are just some thoughts we wanted to share that again might not be apparent from just reading some of the materials on the county's website. I think it's very clear, and I'll just say, just full disclosure, I have not personally been through the process. I just heard about it from a lot of folks, so that's why I'm happy there are folks here who have been through it who can share their own personal insights. But this process will take a significant amount of time, and so you really are going to need to build, we would recommend that you build a group of people to help you. And I might have been saying you need to do this or you will need to do this, but really it's a task force or a committee or a group of concerned citizens that probably need to do this. This is not most likely the job of one person. Um, there's a lot to do. So don't be fooled by don't be fooled by that. You just or be prepared that be prepared for what you're getting into. It will take a significant amount of time and effort. Um, it will also take some money. There are costs that you can expect that the county will not cover or the state will not cover. Um, some of those, would include a lot of mailings. You need to get your ballots to somebody, and you cannot stick things into people's mailboxes. So you might need to be mailing ballots. You might want to mail other materials. You might just want to print flyers. You might want to print yard signs. There's all kinds of things that you might need to do. I know in the Fairway Drive task forces, they actually built websites to help keep people informed. Maybe some of that's just personal time and effort, but maybe there's hosting costs. Maybe you could leverage HOA resources, but again, it's not a free process, if you will. There is some investment of funds to get through the process successfully. And what I was going to show you here is this is just an excerpt. This is just a copy of there's a traffic calming operating procedures that's on the county's websites, and this is what the county says is going to be your responsibility if you embark on this process. And I'm not suggesting this is an exhaustive list of all the things that you actually will need to do, but these are some of the things that they, are upfront about that you will need to take care of, right? So there's a lot that's going to be on your plate, and it's really going to be up to you to get through it. And I think the other thing that I've definitely heard a lot is that, you might be working with folks in your supervisor's office, working with folks at the county. I think much less likely you would be working with folks at VDOT. But, again, what we hear a lot from people is that, the parties that you're working with are pretty neutral in this process. They're not necessarily going to be your cheerleaders, right? And I think one of the things we want folks to know is that, it can be frustrating, and no one's telling you you're doing a good job. No one's telling you you're doing a good thing. And nobody necessarily is supporting you outside of your own task force. So one of the reasons we're doing this tonight is we want you to know that we want you to succeed, and we want to be able to help you when you need help. I think that's one of the most important things we wanted to share tonight is that we will help you to the extent that we can, and we will support you to the extent we can because we do want you to be successful. If you get to the point in the process where the county has come out and determined that, you have a speeding problem on your neighborhood street, we need to get that fixed, right? And disappointing that it might not work out that way. So we're gonna jump in and help you to the extent that we can. Okay, and here's some tips that or maybe some insights that we can offer. We already talked a little bit about early in the process, you need to get these directly affected property owners on board. Jamie jumped in and noted that, these are property owners. They're not necessarily who's in the residence at the time, so there's perhaps some legwork there. We've heard from people that this was not, something that they necessarily thought that they would need to do, but this is a key step, and you can't look past this. And you're going to need to figure out how to get all of these folks on board. This is, 100%. I think someone can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have one holdout, you're not going to be able to move forward.
Yeah, I mean
So,
they can torpedo the plan just by, depending on how far apart devices are, where they say no, it could actually end the whole effort.
Yeah, right.
but also what they don't what FCDOT doesn't tell you is that there are ways that they can move things around, but they won't tell you and they won't help you. But if you expressly ask, can I move this to here, or is there another thing I can put here? They like I would really stress to people that they need to keep engaging FCDOT to do their jobs until they come up with a plan that
Yeah.
can work.
Okay. Oh, so don't give up at this step, but it is an important one to focus on. Okay, and then we've heard a lot of feedback about, the community meetings can be challenging. Um, and again, people can share their experiences, but my understanding is that FCDOT's role at the meetings is pretty limited. Again, they're not going to be showing slides that are talking about the benefits of slowing traffic. They're not going to put up slides showing how the risk of fatalities increases as speed increases. They're not going to be showing slides about how, property values might increase if traffic calming measures are implemented, right? It's going to be pretty vanilla. Here's the plan. Here's the speed study. And you're going to have to be the one that's dealing with angry neighbors that are asking for things that the program doesn't provide. You might have people at the community meeting say, how come we can't get a traffic light? Or we just need the police department to come out and sit on the corner. So it's difficult, and we can try and help you prepare. We can show you what some other folks have done in terms of presentation materials for the meeting, but if education is a part of this process that we can help with, we're happy to do that. I mean, I'll go out on a limb and say we'll come to your meeting and help you present or participate, and be a part of the process.
So
But
Chris, FCDOT, they do a little presentation, and actually they are improving. Like the second one that we had, they made a little presentation where they showed something about like how your vision narrowed when you drove faster. They still don't
okay,
really think that's actually going to convince anyone to vote. And they do answer the questions, like it is their job to answer the questions. They do it in a really lackadaisical, we have no agency. We don't care if this passes or not. We're never going to actually say your road is dangerous and something needs to be done. So you really
okay,
need to be there to keep an eye on what they say, and also the history of the road. They, for example, don't bother to know what you've already asked for and what has happened. So the main point I wanted to make about the meeting is you need to come to the meeting with your own presentation, because they are absolutely not advocating for the plan. They're just like, oh, shucks, maybe the community wants all the cars going this fast. Who are we to say no?
yeah, that goes back to the point
It,
about them being somewhat neutral in the process. So, okay, thanks for those insights, Jamie. Um, Okay, and then, again, there's sort of this marketing challenge that you'll have. Some of that is just, convincing people what the benefits of the project are. Um, the other part of it is just finding all of these people. And again, I hope I do this right, but I believe folks are and I don't think I got into this anywhere else in the presentation, so I'll say it here. at some point you're going to have to make a decision about whether or not the balloting is going to be property owners or current residents, which would, for example, be a renter. And I think you have to basically make that choice, which of those two groups of people you want to vote. And both of them have their challenges, right? I mean, property owners, as someone has said previously, might live in a different state or even internationally, but you can find out who those folks are through tax records. But it's not simple. And then current residents, you don't know who those are unless you knock on their door. If you're not going to know who the renter of a property owner is unless you literally knock on their door. And so, we hear a lot about people, walking door to door and handing out flyers, and that takes time, and you have to be able-bodied, and or you have to have volunteers who are willing to help you. Someone just, I think Jamie was saying she'd heard someone, I'm trying to think who it was. Someone told me recently that they had used high school kids who needed volunteer service hours to help them, to go to door and hand out flyers. So there's ways to do this, but um, there's a significant amount of effort required in basically educating your community, like that whole area that FCDOT determines is affected by this plan, and getting them on board and understanding what it is you're trying to do and understanding what the benefits are. And that's the time and effort, but also the money that we talked about before. And then again, I think we talked about the voting process before. I think this is where I put this little example, of how difficult it can be to get a successful vote. I think one of the points here that has been made to me is that, is going to be up to the task force to decide when to open the vote. I don't think the county makes that decision for you. So you kind of just need to figure out when you're ready, when you think people are going to be engaged and available to respond. So maybe not in the summer, for example, what people might, but there's a lot to think through there about how to prepare for and when you're ready to initiate the vote. Okay, the next slide, I'm going to talk through some resources that we have available to you, and then at that point we can go back, and I'm happy to, I'll stop presenting, and we could go back and do some questions, and I'd love to hear people's feedback about other areas that they found, worked well, didn't work well, etc. But let me get through the last slide, which is the RTAP resources slide. So first of all, the county has an RTAP website. I think I've got it pulled up here. We could look at it real quick. And it has, a good bit of information. I already showed you actually this RTAP quick reference chart, but each of the programs has more information, some linked resources, etc. Like these are all the details you might want to need sort of when you're in the early phases of the process. So this is certainly a very good and pretty comprehensive resource. Your district supervisor's office and staff, shout out to Morgan. They're going to be very helpful. The link I put here to this My Neighborhood app is a place that you can go. You can type in your home address and you can find out about all of your elected representatives. It'll throw up Jim McKay and your district supervisor. It'll also throw up your state elected officials, et cetera. It's just generally a good resource. So hopefully you know who your district supervisor is and know how to contact them. But if you don't, this is one place you can go to find it. But this is what they're there for, right? They're your local representative, and I think I would hope folks like Morgan who work in each district supervisor's office are available and willing to help you with your questions as well. And then we have our own website, a resource website, which I'm going to show you real quick if you haven't seen it before. It's if you just go to novasafestreets.org, it's on the resources tab, RTAP resource guide. There's a link to download a PDF. It's about an 8-page document that sort of has our take on the process. And again, it talks about sort of where the pain points are and some tips and tricks and things to know, things to be ready for, things you might not get by reading the county's documentation. So I would definitely suggest you take a look at the resource guide, and I will show that to you real quickly just so you get an idea of what it looks like. Sorry, here it is. Here, this is our resource guide. If you have suggestions for how we can improve it, please send me a note. The intent was for this to be a living document that would evolve, hopefully with the program. So, but just to give you an idea of what we have in there, just basically, I'm not gonna go through the guide, but it's available to you. But just some information about all of the different steps in the process. But the other thing about the website I want to show out is we do have a lot of resources. Um, a lot of these came from Jamie and her Fairway Drive effort, but we've gotten them from other places as well. But there are a number of other things that are listed here, as you can see, some information about benefits, the Fairway Drive FAQ, because they spent a lot of time, putting together. They have a great website with a lot of information, so we borrowed a lot of it. Some more technical information about device options and lots of examples, again, from the Fairway Drive project, because Jamie was willing to share them with us so that you can see what does a ballot map look like? What does the device map look like? I'll just open one of these just so you can see it real quick, just so that you can sort of lay eyes on what some of these things look like. So I hope it's a useful resource, but it is there for everyone to use. This is being very, very slow, but there
I've
we
got
go.
more stuff to add to it now.
Yeah, yeah. We'll take more examples, the better. So I'm very open to feedback on how we can improve the resources that we do provide, and the best way to do that is lessons learned from people who've been through it. So we've got all the stuff on our website. I'm not going to pretend to be the best resource, but I want you to have my email address, or our generic contact email address, because I'm happy to help and connect you with the people that are best suited to help you. And if I don't know the answer, I'll track it down for you. And if I can help you get an answer to a question, I will certainly do that. So you can consider me a resource as well, and Fairfax Families for Safe Streets as a resource as well. So other than questions, feedback, suggestions, that's pretty much what I had to go through tonight. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing so that we can discuss. If you're okay, I'd like to keep recording since some of the questions and answers might be useful to others as well. So hopefully that's okay. At some point I'll stop recording and we could even continue if you'd like. But let me stop sharing so that it make it easier for me to see everybody. Okay, well, anyway, there's stuff in the chat which I could sort of try and catch up with. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat, but for those who maybe are newer to the process, or just learning about the process, maybe I'll start with you guys. There anybody who has any questions just about the nature of the process, how the process works, and then maybe we could get into folks sharing their thorns and roses, or whatever you want to call it, about their experience with the process. Anybody have any questions?
Hey, Chris, it's Jose. I think maybe I have a global question. Um, has there been appetite from the county to kind of make this less of a undertaking? Because I feel like you're like Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill. Like maybe that's not the
Yeah,
greatest analogy to do, but from like a equity perspective, it feels like minority communities, communities of color, even HOAs have this daunting task to kind of provide for safety in their communities.
yeah,
And I think it kind of contradicts with the county's One Fairfax policy and some of the other things that FCDOT kind of want to hopes to practice and preaches, but is not doing so. So I guess maybe the question is, has the county thought about it? If not, has maybe that's something for like our local delegates that go to Richmond or their senators to kind of give more leniency to these type of processes? Because I mean, VDOT has, they, they want to move cars, and that's not what I know this organization wants to do, but and others. But
Yeah.
I guess I think I feel like there's a path forward. Um,
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously we have a long list of things we'd like to see change with the program, and most of it is about making it easier. And I will say, I think I already said it, but to me, it's troubling to me that you would have a constituent identify a safety concern, have transportation officials come out and verify that there is a safety concern, right? That you have excessive speeding happening on the road, and yet nothing might come of that process if that citizen, if that, community is unable to navigate this process. So, I mean, that's definitely a concern. I think one of the challenges that we have that I'm hoping, and I talked about it might be there would be next steps at the end of the presentation. One of the things I would like to do is just learn about what it would take to make changes to the program. Fairfax County has said, there's little that they can do because the authority comes from VDOT, and VDOT has laid out these boundaries, and the county has to conform to sort of what the program as VDOT has defined it. But you know, the we don't know who at VDOT to speak with yet. Yeah, so I think we're still trying to figure out what that looks like, Jose. I don't know if it's something the Board of Supervisors can do. I don't know if it requires engagement with our state local officials who have oversight of VDOT. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I
Can
think we
I jump
Jamie's,
in,
I
Chris?
think I think we're definitely interested in advocating for some change and some improvement. Go
Chris,
ahead, Jamie. Yeah.
and I just want to add, okay, so from the first time that I read the rules of this program in 2019, I have been advocating for people to look at the inequities baked into this process and the fact that this voting requirement was actually made more stringent in 2018. It used to be easier, and they deliberately made it harder. And you need to know for real that our district supervisors, the majority of them, are in 100% support of doing it this way. And the reason that they give me over and over is they say traffic calming, is a contentious subject. And people complain, and they have made it absolutely clear up the chain of command, including most of our past elected officials, that they are more worried about people calling them up and complaining than they are about our safety. And the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around from day one of doing RTAP on my street and then, watching us do RTAP on the other end of our street is that I really wanted to believe that our county stands for what it says it stands for. But unless you have a different idea, they don't. What they care about is not having people call and complain that they have to go over a speed hump or they have to slow down or that a couple parking spaces have been taken because you're trying to slow people down. And if you're going to do this program, the number one thing I would suggest people to do is from the beginning, just know that your elected officials do not care if it passes. They are just as happy to have it fail so that they don't have to listen to people complain. Now, we have some new people who are elected, and I did recently speak to Karen Keys-Gamarra and Jennifer Boysko, and they did express, at least, to my face, that this was important and that they were going to look into it. But it's been since 2019, and FCDOT still will not even give us the name of their VDOT contact so that we can address it. Like, FCDOT is all in on keeping this impossible, and so are your district supervisors.
Well, I appreciate Jamie's commentary, Chris, and you know, I do think that there is a path forward. I mean,
Yeah,
regurgitating and whatever that avenue is.
yeah,
Um, I think what it boils down to is, um, if the rules have changed, why are we moving goalposts also as a community? But I'm interested to
yeah.
hear what others have to say as well. Thank you for the time.
We have the
Oh, no problem.
presentation from 2018 when they raised that limit. And Jamie, I don't know if you remember, but I'm pretty sure in that presentation that they stated that also. It was like the reason was because they of complaints, like
Hmm.
that they
Well,
wanted
I think they're,
more buy-in.
I think the reason in that they, well, I didn't, I mean, I've seen the presentation. I wasn't there, so I didn't hear any of the verbal, the audible part of it. But the presentation states they're doing it in response to VDOT's changes to the program. So they were aligning the county's program with VDOT changes. But suffice it to say, I don't know. I'm not, it doesn't matter to me who ultimately we have to speak with. We'll speak with whomever has the authority to make changes to the program. If we have to go to VDOT, we'll go to VDOT. If there's bandwidth, if there's capacity within the county to change the program, we'll go there. But that's something that we're going to try and work on is figure out what those where those levers are and what we can do. But I certainly agree to Jamie to the point that I think the process is hard for a reason. They want I think it's untenable, but they do want the bar to be high. And unfortunately, I think for safety, I think that's unfortunate.
Well,
But
and
that's
honestly,
definitely something.
it seems like they wanted higher for poorer people and communities of color because like they're putting these undue uh, monetary burdens on people
Yeah,
like and
there.
they just seem punitive to me. I mean, like, why else would you make people, have to pay all the postage, pay all the printing, and like when they have discounts on mailing, they could help out with that.
Yeah,
They could help out with printing costs. It's probably cheaper for them to print. They have, copiers in their offices. They could help out. Why don't they do
yeah.
that?
There are some pretty clear equity concerns
Yeah.
as well. I agree with you, Steve.
So you had commented on the like I guess it was limits on like requiring this process to go through, and then like when it fails, not having anything to back it, any other path after that. Because I don't know if you can see my graphic. I tried to jam it in there, but it was like our study for our second FC or RTAP effort. They in the study it showed that 47 speeders in 24 hours were going 55 to 75 miles an hour plus in our 25-mile-an-hour zone.
Hmm.
And, you know, FC dot in our meeting basically said that they were not, they had no other plan other than RTAP. And if it failed, then I guess the community didn't want to fix it. And I feel like when it gets to that level, and I hear Jamie feels the same way, I mean, that's a safety concern that they should be dealing with. Like there's a level that they should just be doing something and they, possibly voting on options, but not no option. And
Right.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I mean, yeah, I think this is something we run into all the time inside RTAP and outside in terms of the way the speed study data is looked at by transportation officials. It's very frustrating. I live on Blake Lane that's been through a 5+ year process of trying to get safety improvements implemented after two high school
yeah,
girls were killed. And we had a week-long speed study that, showed 35-mile-an-hour road, showed that the 85th percentile was 43.5%, right? So not a problem, you know. But of course,
yeah,
like you, I looked at the data and every day of that speed study, there was at least one car that was going more than 90 miles an hour down Blake
right.
Lane,
And that's
right?
all it takes to kill somebody, right?
And yeah, and well, guess how fast the guy was going that killed the two girls? He was going
Yeah,
85 miles an hour, right?
yeah.
So, but that's not, yeah. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I'm not, I don't want to be in the position of defending the county because I think there's a lot about this program that is wrong. But I think you do have to say that they've been, they've, they are constrained to some extent by what VDOT has allows them to do. Like, the list of devices that they're allowed to use is what VDOT says they're allowed to do. And so, I think that can all be changed, but it is, I think, um,
I
it's
think,
unfortunate that the community can raise a safety concern. In my opinion, the speed study would confirm that it is a concern, and yet nothing would come of it. I think
yeah.
is just, well, it's not disappointing. It's more than that, but it's
I think
upsetting.
unfortunately, I mean, Jamie's kind of caught them in this is that FC dot and V dot both like to blame each other to keep you guessing who's actually responsible for things.
Yeah,
And that, I think a lot, like for instance, that data on that graphic, I made that a flyer with that information because FC dot wouldn't let me put it in the ballot. And it's data that comes right from their study. Why
yeah,
would they not let me tell people that to encourage them to vote? And what they wanted me to put in there was the 85th percentile, which is a flawed measure for traffic calming. Like that's
yeah,
not what it was meant for. It's meant for setting a speed limit for a road, and it's an average that hides all of those high speeds.
yeah.
So
Morgan, did you want to jump in on something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you all kind of were having the conversation I was having in my head as we were going, because, like, what we were saying about FC dot not, if one thing doesn't work, then there's no other solution. That is kind of how I have learned the VDOT realm to be a lot, and so. And it's frustrating either way, but then when you get to the two agencies kind of blaming each other or shifting the blame, I just find that somebody's not doing their job in that case, because somebody needs to be finding a solution. Like
Yeah,
the solution is not to just shift the blame. So I just want to agree and say that I'm hearing you all, and this is beyond the RTAP discussion, is something that our office is really trying to do something about, but finding barriers at every turn. So definitely
okay.
something we're working on, but
Okay,
yeah.
well, I'd love to talk with you more about it after outside the meeting too, Morgan, and
Sure.
maybe if Dolly is willing to speak about it, we can maybe we can get started on figuring out some path forward.
Yeah, that sounds
and
good.
thank you for trying because it is a tough problem. I know Jamie's been
Yeah,
trying for a long time. So
yeah. Um, Phil, you asked a question about research done into what other municipalities across the country do. I mean, I think we've looked and we can't find any other voting requirements like this anywhere, but I don't know if
yeah.
other municipalities have similar programs, sort of
So
community-based efforts. I don't know. I don't know. Anybody know?
I mean, I spent a lot of time looking for some. A lot of places have sort of similar things. I will tell you that in frustration during the last effort, I actually called the RTAP people in Maryland, and they have a very similar voting requirement. But when I asked about what would happen if it failed, he did say to me, like, he literally said to me, if it's really dangerous, it's beholden upon us to do something. And I was really struck by the difference between that and, the aw shucks Stephen Knudsen approach of, well, I
Yeah,
guess it's just not what the community wants. And there are other places in the country that simply you you have an initiation where you have to get the people on your street to sign something saying it's a problem. And then they do speed studies and they literally just work from the most dangerous to the least dangerous with the funds that they have. There's
yeah,
no extreme made up voting requirement. There's no you having to traipse from house to house, you paying thousands of dollars of
yeah.
your own money.
Yeah, I think if people would understand that there might need to be some sort of triage process, they maybe couldn't fix every problem in, same time, but the voting is difficult. So Tao, you were asking in the chat about how long a project typically takes. I mean, I'm sure folks could share their personal experience with their project. And Morgan, do you have a wider view? Is it possible for you to say that these things take a year, 2 years, 3 years in your experience?
No, I don't think I've been working on this long enough to
Okay.
know. Sorry.
So, I
Okay.
mean, I hate to be the one who just keeps jumping in, but these are questions that FCDOT needs to answer for us. They've been asked a lot of questions from, how long did they take? Which things are most likely? They did put up the dashboard now. We don't know what percentage of these pass. We don't know which percentage of them never make it to the voting. We don't know what percentage of them would have passed before they changed the voting requirement. They've been asked, and which is what I'm hoping Morgan can ask for us. That I brought to this meeting is a bunch of questions that FCDOT, for whatever reason, they want. It's a reinventing the wheel for each group. It's like, well, it will just depend on your community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how did yours take from beginning to end, Jamie, from initiation to installation?
Well, our first one was very, very long because it was basically Steve and I running it, and it was over COVID. So it took a long time. But what was our, Steve, like 4 years, maybe?
That was nearly 5. And the other thing was the county we had started out with just our half of the road, where we knew of a problem, and they asked us to take on the whole road, which was hundreds and hundreds of houses, residences and it was so a really huge voting area. And not only that, they tried to tie in an effort from Reston Association where they were trying to deal with traffic coming at Hook Road, and they had their own plan they were trying to get through VDOT. So it became a mess. And then eventually they just pulled it apart again. And, we finally made progress when they finally put it back to our part of our side of the road. But, that's why I'm helping the other side get something, because I kind of felt bad about it, when it got split up again and people were upset when we voted and got something down here and they didn't, and they've got a really bad speeding problem down there. So.
Yeah, but yours is taking a lot shorter, like a year, a little over.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, Chris, this is why FCDOT won't do what you're doing and what Jamie's done with you, is putting up resources that show what past efforts did, what worked for them, and there's no reason they can't do that. And they won't tell you. We've asked them over and over again. Jamie's asked many times, why not help people in that sense? People don't know how to. We didn't know anything about doing a community effort like this at all when we started.
Yeah.
We had to learn all of it the hard way because they did not offer up any information about past efforts and what worked and what methods they use. For even mailing out the ballots. Did people mail them out? Did they just drop them at people's doors? And there's no reason you can't share that information. That would help a lot. And just showing the fact that my current effort, like Jamie said, is taking me about a year. We're at the vote, so it took a year. So it got that much shorter, just having knowledge of the process and having gone through it before,
Okay. So as a town, maybe sounds like a year plus, a year to 2 to 3 years, depending. I think it depends a lot on the complexity of the plan and
It
the
does.
universe of,
And the
residents.
size of the ballot area. I mean, some of them are quite large. This second efforts right now, it's 236 or 242, sorry, 242 residences, which is a lot, and try to have people take flyers around, and we've done repeatedly, going around and passing out flyers and door hangers and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say I'm really surprised at the complexity of this process. I live in Kings Park, and which is Braddock Road, and we have all this stuff. And I don't know how they got it. I know it was about 35 years ago when there were more cars turning in and cutting through on Southampton Drive to get to Braddock Road from Rolling Road than there were continuing on Rolling Road and taking Rolling to Berkeley Road to Braddock Road. And the traffic, we almost didn't buy our house because there was so much, it took longer to get out from Southampton to Braddock Road than it took to get from Braddock Road to DC. That's how bad the cut. But there was this obviously a big problem, and they came through with we have speed humps, we have traffic circles, we have crosswalks, and it's annoying enough that people don't cut through anymore, and that all of a sudden wasn't a problem anymore. So it did happen. I guess this was before this RTAP process, but it was it worked, and it's a shame that nobody talks about. This was a success.
Mm-hmm.
This was a real success because if you go fast, you're not going to have a transmission if you do that.
Yeah.
And everybody just understands that, and so that's cool. But I mean, but even I can't. I've asked, how did we get this done? I remember there were meetings because people like they even changed the street pattern, so there were you can't make left turns and right turns at certain streets. You have to just go, you have to make a right turn. I remember my neighbor being so upset about it. He lost his left turn, but it all worked out to make it a much safer place to live, actually. So it was a success, but it was a success 35 years ago they did this.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure what was in place 35 years ago, Susan, but I mean,
No, it was.
this isn't, RTAP isn't the only way.
And now they're 40 years old. So it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, RTAP isn't the only way that you might, end up with a chicane or, turn calming or a new crosswalk. Like, this isn't the only way that you could end up with those things. The county or VDOT does corridor studies. There's, new land use development processes that go through rezoning, and there's proffers for transportation improvements. So, there are other ways that active transportation, bike ped infrastructure is implemented, but this is the process that unfortunately we have to work with for, sort of a community, a citizen, a community stepping forward and saying, I have a problem in my street that you're not looking at. And so it's a tool. It's just, unfortunately, it's a pretty challenging one.
Well, what's interesting, Chris, the things you listed there. For instance, we got a crosswalk up by Hook Road. No, and like people have been trying to get crosswalks and everything, because of the speeding issues, but and VDOT just did it. They didn't ask for a vote. They didn't require a vote to do that. They just went and did it because they can do that. Like this voting is actually nonsense. I mean, they don't actually have to ask. All they're worried about is people complaining afterward or pushing to get them removed.
Right.
Yeah. So
no, absolutely. All right. Any other questions?
The other thing, Susan, it matters who owns the roads too. I believe because I think one of the criteria in the RTAP, I think it was like a VDOT owned road. It had to be.
These are VDOT roads.
Okay.
Yeah, and because we also have roads that are they are not VDOT roads, and they were access roads that were put in when Rolling Road was widened, and they took some of people's front yards. In order to make it safer, you don't pull out from your subdivision onto Rolling Road. You pull out from your subdivision from Kings Park onto the access road. However, VDOT does not consider that their road. I don't know why, but they don't. And so we have had to ask our supervisor, talk to the county, and it is a county priority road. It gets plowed like when schools get plowed and fire department and police buildings and all. When they get plowed, this access road gets plowed, and I worked with them on that, and in fact, I'm working with VDOT right now because I told them, I said, they're paving all of Kings Park now, and they've sent it out, and okay, that's great. But I noticed the access road is not on their map, and it's not on their map, so they're not going to pave it. So I called the VDOT guy, and I said, we're going to have a problem here because you're not paving the access road. And so I gave him the history of it and everything. And he said, look, we're going to approach this. I said, please bring it up. And they were very nice about it. They were more cooperative than they were 2 years ago when I talked to them about some other paving issues that they were working with. And I said, but we're going to approach this from the, from the county level, from our, talking to our supervisor about it. And in the Fairfax County Department of Transportation also, to get as much leverage as we possibly can to get this road paved when everything else is paved, because or else they just won't. And those people that are on that frontage road, they get mad when they're left out. But that's why. So yeah, it's we know that they we know that they are VDOT roads and they're responsible for them and they're okay with it, but they are but we do have one situation where they're not, and that is a real trial. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know if anybody's gone through Herndon recently. Like there are a bunch of speed humps in Herndon, and they've got a bunch of the your speed signs, and that's because Herndon owns most of their roads. So they have their own processes, and it's easier.
Yeah, same. We were just talking about that in Vienna. The town of Vienna also owns its own roads, and there's all kinds of nice traffic calming measures in Vienna. So, Fairfax County is enormous, and it deals with VDOT, and it's not as easy, unfortunately.
And when you cross the line between Fairfax County and Fairfax City, all of a sudden you got a lot of humps and a lot of calming measures and everything. So
same thing
too. Yes.
Yep.
Fairfax City, Falls Church City, and then there's the incorporated towns of Vienna, Herndon, and Clifton. They all have their control over their own roads, and it's noticeably different, I think, when you enter those jurisdictions. Okay. Any other? I know there are a lot of passionate people about RTAP. Any other questions or feedback? Okay. Well, I hope you found tonight informative. I appreciate all of the productive conversation. Again, this will be a nice addition to our resources. I'll post this and share this with our membership for people who missed it. And again, I think, I'll take some of this feedback to the board. Obviously, Steve and Jamie have shared a lot already, but others tonight did as well. If you want to follow up with me after the meeting and provide feedback, you're welcome to. But yeah, I'd like to, as a board, we'll need to discuss, but we would like to, I think, continue to work on figuring out how we can hopefully implement some improvements to the process. Again, whether that's at the board level, and the county level, or at the state level, I don't know yet. We'll figure it out. But and then last thing I'll say one more time is if you're planning on going through the process or know someone who might be, please send them our way. We are very much interested in trying to help people get through this process successfully. Okay, well, looks like Jamie and Steve, Jamie's still here. Keep up the good work. Keep up the fight. We're happy you're working so hard at it, and let us know if we can help. Morgan, thank you for coming tonight and fielding some questions. I'll connect with you separately and would like to talk with you about this more. But thanks everyone for coming tonight. I don't have any other announcements or any other business to share, and it's almost 8 o'clock anyway, so I think we'll wrap it up there.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.